181. That is the number of yards this receiver gained in Super Bowls. 3 touchdowns, 3 championship rings, 3 separate defenses that knew exactly what was coming and could not do a single thing to stop it. But that number is not why I am telling you this story. I am telling you this story because of what happened 43 years after his first Super Bowl victory. I am telling you this story because of a phone call that never came, a gold jacket that arrived too late, and a man who died believing the football world had forgotten him. The NFL does not want you to know what they did to this player, how they ignored him for decades while lesser receivers walked into Canton, how they let him fade into obscurity while the league celebrated players who could not carry his helmet. And I am going to expose every detail of that injustice tonight. But first, I need to take you back to a moment that changed the Super Bowl forever. A single play that made defensive coordinators across the league lose sleep. A play so devastating, so perfectly executed, that the defender who got burned still refuses to discuss it publicly. January 25, 1981, New Orleans, Louisiana. Super Bowl XV. The Oakland Raiders are facing the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles have the most ferocious defense in the NFL. They have spent 2 weeks studying film. They have devised a game plan specifically designed to stop one player. They have done everything right. And it does not matter. Because standing on that field, lined up at wide receiver, is a man whose speed has never been accurately measured, a man whose acceleration defies the laws of physics, a man who has spent his entire career making the impossible look routine. In approximately 90 seconds, this man is going to catch a pass that destroys the Eagles' game plan. He is going to score a touchdown that seals a championship, and he is going to cement his legacy as the most feared Super Bowl receiver in NFL history. But here is what makes this moment truly remarkable. The Eagles knew he was going to run that exact route. They had practiced against it for 2 weeks. Their cornerback was in perfect position, and the receiver still beat him by 3 full steps. How? How does a defender do everything right and still get destroyed? That question haunted NFL defensive coordinators for over a decade, and the answer to that question is the key to understanding why this receiver was different from anyone who has ever played the game. But I am getting ahead of myself. Because before I tell you about Super Bowl XV, I need to tell you about a track meet in 1971, a track meet that almost ended this story before it began. University of Colorado, spring 1971. A young sprinter is warming up for the 100-meter dash. He is the fastest athlete anyone at Colorado has ever seen. Scouts from NFL teams have already started calling. His future seems limitless. But something is wrong. He feels a tightness in his hamstring that was not there yesterday. He ignores it. Young athletes always ignore warning signs. He stretches briefly and takes his position in the starting blocks. The gun fires. He explodes forward. For approximately 40 meters, he is running the fastest race of his life. He is going to break records. He is going to prove that he deserves to be called the fastest man in America. And then his hamstring tears. Not a minor pull, not a strain that heals in a few weeks, a complete rupture that sends him crashing to the track in agony. In that moment, every dream he has ever had seems to evaporate. His speed was his identity, his speed was his future, and now doctors are telling him he may never run competitively again. What happens over the next 12 months is the first chapter of a story the NFL has tried to forget, because this young sprinter does something that reveals the true nature of his character. He does not quit. He spends an entire year in rehabilitation. He rebuilds his body from scratch. He teaches himself to run again, developing new mechanics that actually make him faster than before. When the 1972 NFL Draft arrives, most teams have written him off. They remember the injury. They question his durability. They pass on him round after round after round. But one team sees something different. One team has a philosophy of collecting talented players that other franchises have discarded. One team is run by a man who trusts his eyes more than injury reports and conventional wisdom. The Oakland Raiders select this receiver in the 4th round, pick number 98 overall. And the NFL will never be the same. I still have not told you his name, and I'm not going to tell you yet, because you need to understand something first. You need to understand why this receiver terrified defensive coordinators in a way that no receiver before or since has matched. Speed is common in the NFL. Every year, players run fast 40 times at the combine. Every year, scouts identify receivers who can stretch the field vertically. But speed alone does not create fear. Speed alone does not make grown men change their entire defensive philosophy. Speed alone does not cause Hall of Fame cornerbacks to request help before the ball is even snapped. What this receiver possessed was something far more rare. He had the ability to accelerate while running at full speed. Let me explain what that means. Most fast receivers reach their top speed within the first 20 or 30 yards of their route. After that, they are running as fast as they can run. Defenders know this. They calculate angles based on the receiver's maximum velocity. This receiver did not have a maximum velocity, or if he did, nobody ever saw it. He would be running full speed past a defender. The defender would be matching him stride for stride, and then, without any visible change in his mechanics, this receiver would simply pull away. It was like he had a second gear that the human body is not supposed to possess. Cornerbacks who covered him described the experience as surreal. They would be in perfect position, running the best coverage of their lives, and suddenly they would watch the back of his jersey shrinking into the distance. There was no explanation. There was no answer. There was only the sickening realization that you had been beaten by something you could not understand. This ability made him the perfect deep threat, but it also made him the perfect weapon for the biggest games. Because in the Super Bowl, defensive coordinators have 2 weeks to prepare. They study film endlessly, they identify tendencies, they develop game plans designed to eliminate the opponent's most dangerous weapons. Against this receiver, none of that preparation mattered. You could know exactly where he was going. You could position your fastest cornerback in perfect coverage. You could do absolutely everything right, and he would still be standing in the end zone waiting for the football while your defender wondered what had just happened. That is why I call him the most feared Super Bowl receiver in NFL history. Not because of his statistics, although those are remarkable. Not because of his championships, although he has more than almost any receiver who ever lived. I call him the most feared because he made the Super Bowl, the game with the most preparation and the highest stakes, look like a casual practice session. Defensive coordinators spent 2 weeks trying to stop him. He spent 3 hours proving that their efforts were meaningless. Now let me tell you about his first Super Bowl. January 9th, 1977, Pasadena, California. Super Bowl XI. The Oakland Raiders are facing the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings have one of the most experienced defenses in football. They have been to 3 previous Super Bowls. They know what championship pressure feels like. They also know exactly who they need to stop. The Raiders' receiver has been destroying defenses all season. He led the NFL in receiving yards in 1974. He has been to multiple Pro Bowls. His deep speed has become legendary throughout the league. Minnesota's defensive coordinator devises a simple strategy. Never let him get behind you. Never let him use his speed. Force him to make catches in front of the defense and tackle him immediately. It is a sound plan. It should work. It does not work. On the Raiders' first scoring drive, quarterback Ken Stabler drops back and looks deep. The Vikings' cornerback is in solid position. He has inside leverage. He is doing exactly what his coaches told him to do. But he has made one critical mistake. He has given the receiver a free release off the line of scrimmage. Just one step, just a moment of hesitation before making contact. That is all this receiver needs. By the time the football is in the air, the cornerback is 3 yards behind. By the time the football arrives, the receiver is completely alone. Touchdown, Oakland. The Vikings sideline goes silent. They had prepared for exactly this situation. They had practiced against exactly this route, and it did not matter. The receiver finishes Super Bowl XI with 4 catches for 79 yards and a touchdown. The Raiders win 32-14. The receiver has his first championship ring. But here is what most people do not remember about that game. The Vikings changed their defensive strategy 3 separate times trying to stop him. They tried man coverage, they tried zone coverage, they tried double coverage with a safety shaded to his side of the field. Nothing worked. Not because they were unprepared, not because they made mistakes, but because some players simply cannot be stopped by scheme alone. Some players require you to have better athletes, and the Vikings did not have anyone who could match what this receiver brought to the field. After the game, Vikings players were asked about the Raiders' receiving corps. Their answers were revealing. They did not talk about how the Raiders had out-schemed them. They did not complain about play calling or adjustments. They simply said they had never seen anyone run that fast, and they hoped they would never see him in a Super Bowl again. That hope would not be fulfilled. 4 years later, the receiver returned to the Super Bowl. Different opponents, same result. Super Bowl XV, New Orleans, the FUL Eagles. The Eagles' defense was historically great that season. They had allowed the fewest points in the NFC. Their secondary was deep and talented. Their defensive coordinator had spent 2 full weeks designing coverage schemes specifically intended to neutralize the Raiders' deep passing game. On paper, this should have been a difficult game for the receiver. The Eagles had the athletes to match his speed. They had the coaching to anticipate his routes. They had every advantage that preparation could provide. The receiver caught 5 passes for 67 yards and a touchdown. The Raiders won 27-10. But the statistics do not tell the real story. The touchdown pass came at a pivotal moment in the game. The Eagles were still within striking distance. Their defense was beginning to find a rhythm. A stop on this drive would have shifted momentum in Philadelphia's direction. The Raiders called a deep post route, the exact play the Eagles had practiced against more than any other, the exact play their cornerback was expecting, and it did not matter.
The receiver released clean from the line. The cornerback was in perfect position, just like he had been in practice all week. The safety was rotating over to provide help, just like the game plan specified. None of it was enough. When the ball arrived, the receiver had created 3 yards of separation. 3 yards against double coverage, 3 yards against the defense that had prepared specifically to prevent this exact play. The catch sealed the victory. The Raiders had their second championship with this receiver as their primary deep threat, and the legend grew larger. But there was still one more Super Bowl to come, and this one would be his masterpiece. January 22nd, 1984, Tampa, Florida, Super Bowl XVIII. The Los Angeles Raiders are facing the Washington Redskins. The Redskins are the defending champions. They have one of the most powerful offenses in NFL history. They are favored to win. What happens over the next 3 hours is the most dominant Super Bowl performance by a receiver that has ever been recorded. 6 catches, 94 yards, 1 touchdown. But those numbers are criminally inadequate. Watch the film of Super Bowl XVIII. Watch how the Redskins defense responds every time this receiver goes in motion. Watch the panic in the eyes of their defensive backs. Watch how their entire coverage scheme shifts based on where he lines up. The Redskins are so terrified of getting beaten deep that they commit extra resources to his side of the field on almost every play. This opens up running lanes for Marcus Allen, who rushes for 200 yards and wins the game's Most Valuable Player award. The receiver does not win MVP. He does not need to. Everyone watching understands that his presence alone is worth more than his statistics suggest. By forcing the Redskins to overcommit to stopping the deep ball, he creates opportunities for everyone else. By being the most dangerous weapon on the field, he makes his teammates better even when he's not catching passes. This is the ultimate form of receiver dominance, not just production, but gravity, the ability to warp an opponent's game plan simply by existing. The Raiders win 38-9. The receiver has his third championship ring, and across 3 Super Bowl appearances, he has compiled 181 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns against defenses that knew exactly what was coming. No receiver in NFL history has produced more consistently on the biggest stage. No receiver has generated more fear in the minds of Super Bowl opponents. No receiver has done more to prove that elite speed, combined with elite intelligence, cannot be stopped by any defensive scheme ever devised. His name is Cliff Branch, and for over 3 decades, the Pro Football Hall of Fame pretended he did not exist. Let me tell you about the greatest injustice in NFL history. The Pro Football Hall of Fame has specific criteria for induction: career statistics, championships, impact on the game, influence on future players. Cliff Branch meets every single criterion. He won 3 Super Bowl championships. He was a 4-time Pro Bowl selection. He led the league in receiving yards. He caught 600 career passes. He was the most feared deep threat of his era. And year after year after year, the Hall of Fame selection committee refused to induct him. The reasons given were always vague. His career statistics were not overwhelming enough. His peak was not sustained long enough. There were other receivers ahead of him on the ballot. These explanations do not survive basic scrutiny. Receivers with fewer championships than Branch have been inducted. Receivers with lower career averages have been inducted. Receivers who never dominated the Super Bowl the way Branch dominated have been inducted. The only explanation that makes sense is also the most infuriating. Cliff Branch played for the Raiders. The Oakland Raiders have always been the NFL's black sheep franchise. Al Davis spent decades fighting the league. The Raiders cultivated an outlaw image that made the NFL establishment uncomfortable. Players who wore silver and black were viewed differently than players who wore more respectable colors. And the Hall of Fame selection committee, consciously or not, held this against Raiders players for years. Cliff Branch waited. Season after season, he watched lesser receivers give induction speeches. Season after season, he wondered why his accomplishments were not considered enough. And season after season, the call never came. By the time Branch reached his 60s, hope had faded. He had accepted that the football establishment would never recognize what he had achieved. He had made peace with being forgotten. His health began to decline. The years of football had taken their toll. The man who had once been the fastest player in the NFL now moved slowly, his body broken by the sport he had loved. On August 3, 2019, Cliff Branch died at his home in California. He was 71 years old. He died believing the Hall of Fame would never induct him. He died thinking his Super Bowl performances, his championships, his legendary speed, none of it had been enough. 3 years later, in 2022, the Pro Football Hall of Fame finally voted Cliff Branch into Canton. He was not there to receive the honor. His gold jacket was presented to his family. His bust was unveiled without him present to see it. The recognition he had deserved for decades arrived too late for him to experience. This is the tragedy of Cliff Branch. Not just that he was overlooked, but that the football world waited until he was gone to acknowledge what everyone had always known. He was the most feared Super Bowl receiver in NFL history. He was a 3-time champion. He was a player who made defenses change their entire philosophy just to slow him down. And he deserved to hear the words Hall of Famer while he was still alive. The NFL failed Cliff Branch. The Hall of Fame failed Cliff Branch. The football establishment failed a man who had given everything to the sport. But we do not have to fail him. We can remember what he did on those Super Bowl Sundays. We can honor the fear he inspired in opponents. We can tell his story to new generations who never saw him play. Cliff Branch ran faster than anyone who came before him. He caught touchdowns in the biggest games ever played. He won championships for a franchise that represented rebellion and excellence in equal measure. And now, finally, he has the recognition he always deserved.
It just came too late. 181 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 championships. One legend who never got to see his own coronation. That is the story of Cliff Branch. That is the story the NFL waited too long to tell. And that is why I will never let his name be forgotten. If you believe Cliff Branch deserved better, subscribe to this channel. We tell the stories of Raiders legends who have been overlooked, disrespected, and ignored by the football establishment. Share this video with anyone who loves Raiders history. Share it with anyone who remembers what Cliff Branch did on those Super Bowl Sundays. Share it with anyone who believes that legends should be honored while they can still hear the applause. The silver and black never forgets its own, and Cliff Branch